Let's start with your role within this organization, within the division. It's essentially a law enforcement agency, and a lot of law enforcement agencies have limited resources, and you have to prioritize what you're going to enforce. Now that you're in this position, how do you see that playing out?
We have responsibility within the marijuana industry over two key segments. The first one is related to the medical side of the industry, where we license and regulate businesses that sell, manufacture, distribute, produce marijuana for medicinal purposes for patients registered with the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. So that's really kind of the primary purpose we had starting back in 2010. Since that time, as most people are aware now, retail marijuana has come online, and we were tasked with a real similar regulatory structure on the retail side of things to license businesses that are going to be doing the manufacturing, production, and sale of marijuana to adults over 21.
And one of the reasons why it's so complicated and tricky right now is because of the federal government's considering marijuana still a controlled substance, and the whole division is essentially in a pretty tricky legal footing, as in the eyes of the federal government. Do you have communications with people in Washington, D.C.?
What we've done is we've taken, in realization or in recognition of how divisive this public policy is, we've taken the approach where we try to engage as many stakeholders from all sides of the issue to the table to discuss how we're going to regulate the business. And so by doing that, we think that we get a real diverse set of opinions from our stakeholder groups that ultimately help us to promulgate regulations that are taking into consideration all those different views.
There was a memo that was sent out last year that was giving some basic tenets to follow, but do you wish that there was more direction?
Well, I think from our perspective, at my level within state government, my focus is really on what the mandates are for this division, and those are really pretty clear. They're handed down from our state constitution, and then they go down into statute, and then ultimately into the regulations that we were able to draft. And so our mandates are what our mandates are. So that's really where we focus our attention. It was certainly helpful to have the direction that we got from the federal government. In fact, as fate would have it, many of the regulations that we had already passed by the time that second memo came out had taken into consideration a lot of those basic tenets you referred to that were in the second Cole memo.
A couple of weeks ago, Governor Hickenlooper was giving an interview to the Durango Herald editorial board, and one thing that they were talking about was marijuana. It was, right after the rollout, and Governor Hickenlooper said during that interview, "I hate Colorado being part of this experiment," speaking about the rollout of recreational marijuana and all eyes being on Colorado. How does a statement like that affect morale within a division whose sole mission it is to be part of this experiment?
Well, I tell you, I keep going back to our stakeholder involvement, and it's really clear when we put a group of stakeholders together that it really involves every possible opinion, background, and interest in this public policy. And so from our perspective, we're really used to hearing all these varying ideas of what should or shouldn't be happening with marijuana policy in the state. And so, like I mentioned before, our job is really just to focus on what our mandates are. I think our if we focus on our mandates and we focus on what we're required to do, that's really where success for us is going to lie. And so we also know that means that we have to listen to every opinion that's out there and just be respectful of them.
Is there a lot of pressure being in a role like this?
There is a lot of pressure for a number of reasons. One is it's a new agency. If you were just going to start up a new agency in a public policy arena that wasn't this divisive, it'd be pretty challenging. And so we're doing that. And then you insert some of the complexities that go along with varied ideas on how this should all be carried out, and it certainly adds a little bit more pressure to it. But I think that's I think that's a reason why a lot of people really like working here, is they kind of thrive in that environment where they're really challenged to take on something that's very unique, where success or failures, kind of up to you and some of the other forces that are out there.
There's been a lot of talk recently about the banking environment for the industry. Mm-hmm. Do you see that opening up anytime soon? I know there's some potential for federal legislation to open up the banking.
I don't claim to be able to prognosticate what's going to happen with federal legislation at this point. From a regulatory standpoint, the more transparent a business can be, the easier it is to regulate them. And so, the way we look at it is that if a company is able to bank, I think it helps us meet some of those objectives. But we've also gotten to the point where we're capable of being able to work with licensees to be able to recreate transactions if we need to. So we're in a position right now where we can be patient and let that process play out while we're still able to meet some of the regulatory framework guidelines that we have.